Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, where we speak about personal development and entrepreneurship. This is episode 168. Today, we will be speaking with Todd Henry. Now, Todd is an author. He has written 5 books. A speaker, he speaks internationally on creativity, productivity, and passion for work. And he is a coach. He helps people and teams generate brilliant ideas. Today, we will be speaking about his latest book, The Motivation Code. Let's listen to the conversation. Todd Henry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Alan, so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Todd, we had a conversation about a year and a half ago. That was my episode number 77, which I published on the month of May of last year. And it was about your previous book, Herding Tigers. But now you are here because you came out with another book, The Motivation Code. And, well, I'm just so full of questions. So, let's get started into that.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, this book has been 4 years in the making. I was actually writing this book even as I was writing Herding Tigers. I was kind of writing it in the background. So it's taken me quite a while to complete the book, but it's exciting that it's finally out.
Okay, so Todd, since I mentioned it's been a year and a half ago, some of my listeners probably don't remember who is this guy Todd, and of course I have a whole bunch of new listeners as well. So can we start with a little bit of background information? Who are you and what do you do, and what is it that led you to this life of writing books and speaking all over the world?
Yeah, so I spent the first part of my life as a creative director for an organization where I led a team of creative professionals. So think writers, designers, people of that nature. And a part of the way into my tenure as a creative director realized that it was really difficult for the people on the team and for myself to go to work and to make things up every day, to be prolific, brilliant, and healthy, as I called it. And so started doing some research into how to help creative professionals be more prolific, brilliant, and healthy consistently. And that led to a podcast, which I launched in 2005. And that podcast pretty quickly took off, and I started getting invitations to come and share some things I was learning with organizations. And I realized, I think there might be a business here. And so one thing led to another, and then I was offered a book deal with Penguin to share some things in a book called The Accidental Creative that came out in 2011. And since then, I've written 4 more books, including The Motivation Code, which just came out. So I wrote a book called Die Empty, a book called Louder Than Words, a book called Herding Tigers, and now Motivation Code, all with Penguin Random House. And I, as you said, theoretically, in non-pandemic times, I travel the world and speak and consult and get to work with some great groups of people all over the world and share how to be, as I said, how to be prolific, brilliant, and healthy all at the same time.
Okay, so you told us that you were working on the background, on the back of your head on this book for a long time. First of all, how did the idea came about, or what is the book about?
Yeah, so in 2016, a friend of mine, Rod Penner, he was a 20-year veteran of a management consulting firm, and he had left that consulting firm years before, but I didn't know what he'd been working on since he left. And he asked me to take a motivation code that he and a team of PhDs had been working on, and a motivation assessment. And I don't know about you, Alan, but I'm a little skeptical whenever somebody asks me to take an assessment because I've taken so many assessments in my life. And so I kind of rolled my eyes, but listen, Rod's a friend, so okay, I'll take the assessment. So I did. And I got the results back, and Rod walked me through them, and I was completely blown away. It was the Motivation Code assessment, the thing that forms the basis of the book. And what I discovered in this assessment was why I could do some activities for days at a time without rest, without eating, and why other activities that will take me 5 minutes, I might procrastinate 3 weeks before I do them. I just can't seem to get motivated to do them. It explained to me why certain relationships are always conflict laden in my life and why other relationships are always harmonic, right? And it explained to me why I succeeded in some leadership roles and I failed in others. Basically, it gave me a blueprint for why it's difficult sometimes for me to get motivated, and at other times I am completely engaged. What I discovered was that we tend to talk about motivation in very broad terms, very, very blunt terms, right? We talk about uh, really primarily two kinds of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So, intrinsic being inner drive, what it is inside of you that drives you, that compels you, and extrinsic motivation being external factors that drive you and compel you. But what this research, by the way, which was conducted over the course of 50 years and was the result of over 1 million achievement stories that were shared over time, distilled into this assessment, what they discovered is that really there are 27 different flavors or themes, as we call them, of motivation or places people get their motivational energy. And your top 3 to 5 motivational themes really determine how you process the world, really determine how you engage with the world and the ways in which you find motivation in your life. And so if you understand that motivation code, as we call it, it can change how you approach everyday activities in a way that will make them more engaging, more meaningful, and more fulfilling.
Okay, but I have friends who take all these other assessment tests, and they swear by it. They beg me to take it as well because it reflects exactly who I am and what is it that I have to do in order to improve myself. And every 6 months, one of my friends come up and almost harass me to take all this one more assessment test.
Right.
So yeah, so my question is, and of course, all of them come from people with PhD degrees who have made, I don't know, years of research. So the story sounds similar.
Yes.
So, but you now, you swear by this one. And I just want to know, what makes this one so unique that it doesn't apply to all the other ones that my friends beg me to take every other week.
Yeah, so a couple of things. That's a very good question because that's exactly what I was thinking, going into this. I mean, I'm a management consultant. I mean, I spend a lot of time in organizations. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of assessments over the course of years, and so I was as skeptical as anybody going into this. So a couple of things I would say. First of all, this isn't just, a handful of years of research. This research began back in the 1950s and 1960s with a guy named Arthur Miller Jr. He spent over 50 years working on, well, the research that he conducted has been perpetuated for over 50 years, but he spent decades himself working with top executives, people of all walks of life from around the world, and mapping motivational patterns. And so this research isn't something that somebody sat around and thought, oh, this is an interesting idea. We should, create these categories. This is really born out of decades of experience and practical knowledge. First of all. Second of all, this is to our knowledge, the only story-driven psychometric assessment on the market, meaning we don't start with an agenda. We're not trying to cram you into certain buckets. We start with your story and then allow you to explain to us why those moments of achievement were so significant. We often experience these moments of achievement in our lives, Alan, where we have something that is deeply meaningful and gratifying, even years after we experience it. It could be some accomplishment, it could be some moment in our life that continues to stick with us, but we very rarely stop to consider, why was that so meaningful? Why does that continue to, even to this day, as I think about it, continue to motivate me? And so what we're trying to do is, instead of just cramming you into a set of buckets that we've established, we're trying to allow you to tell your story and then use that story and your description of that story to figure out what are those unique themes that compel you and that drive you and that create those moments of gratification. And so the reason it's unique is that it doesn't start with us, it starts with you and your experiences. And again, we've parsed over 1 million achievement stories to figure out the language that people use to describe those moments. And that's really how we came up with the 27 themes, or the team came up with the 27 themes, is from parsing the way that people describe those moments of deep engagement over time. So when you're taking the assessment or when you're reading the book, you're really hearing the language that has been used by, tens of thousands of people to describe that theme over time, which is probably why when many people take it, they say, I feel like you wrote this for me. You were talking about me, right? Well, it's because, this is how people talk about that particular motivation.
Right. Okay. The other thing that I noticed right from the start, as soon as I saw the book cover, is that this is the first time in your career that you write a book with co-authors. All the previous four books is your name by itself. Now here you have three other people. Can you tell us how did that work? First of all, who are these other co-authors that you are? Because I just know you. I don't know any of the other ones. And then
Right.
how did the process work? I mean, did you proofread each other's chapters, or did you divide and conquer? How do you write this book together?
Yeah, so Rod Penner is the first co-author, and he is the person who brought me in, who you had me take the assessment in 2016. And the other two co-authors are Dr. Todd Hall, who is a clinical psychologist and a professor who has been part of this research and really helping refine this assessment over the course of the last decade, and Dr. Joshua Miller, who's actually the grandson of Arthur Miller Jr., who began this research back in the 1950s and 60s. So there's a tremendous connection to the heritage as well of all of this research over the course of time with Dr. Joshua Miller. And so the reason I wanted to include them in the book, and while I was the primary author and the primary voice, it's because really it's this research is the result of teams of people over the course of decades pulling together this material. And I wanted to make sure that that was reflected in the book itself, that there were other people along with me who were analyzing what was being written, who were making certain that it comported to what the science tells us, not what I as the author or the outside expert was reading, but I wanted to make sure that we were comporting with what the data has shown us over time. So it was very important to me that we got this right. It was very important to me that this reflected the true science of motivation and not just my perception of it. In spite of all my research, I could get things wrong because I haven't been doing this for decades like some of these people have, right? So just
Right.
wanted to make sure that it reflected accurately what it was that we were trying to communicate.
Okay, so on part two of your book, you have the motivational themes, and you have six of them: the visionary, the achiever, the team player, the learner, the optimizer, and the contributor. Can you go over one or two of these themes and tell us how the pros and cons of these themes and how maybe we can apply it to our life?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're describing are what we call motivational families. And these
Yes.
families are groups of themes that share some DNA. So just like in a biological family, you have maybe two siblings, a brother and a sister, and they share some DNA, but they're going to look a little different. They're going to have different personalities, different traits, different talents, different kinds of things. But they probably also look a little bit similar to one another because they share some DNA, some biological DNA. Well, in the same way, the themes that live within these motivational families share a little bit of DNA in that we often find them together and they have some similar attributes, but the way that they play out day to day are very different. So the first family is the optimizer family. And the optimizer family is motivated to set up an operation or to ensure that systems are functioning well. So think the person who wants to squeeze efficiency out of everything. That's what this family primarily is comprised of. So you have themes. The themes in this family are improve, organize, develop, make it work, establish, and make it right. But these are each different ways in which that optimization urge plays out, right, day to day. And there are different positive attributes and also shadow side attributes of each of those themes. The second family is what we call the achiever family. The achiever family is driven to move forward and to persevere, to complete challenging objectives, to, at the end of the day, really what they want to do is move things forward. So there are four themes in this family: bring to completion, which is about just getting things done, right? Meet the challenge, advance, and overcome. The third family is what we call the key contributor family. And the key contributor family is driven to highlight their own contribution. They want to be seen either as the center of the action or at the center of the action. They want to make sure that other people know that without them, it couldn't have happened. And so they tend to be competitive. They tend to want to control outcomes. That's the key contributor family. So you have excel, bring control, be central, gain ownership, be unique, and evoke recognition. Those are the themes within the key contributor family. And then the next family is what we call the learner family. And the learner family is motivated to explore and learn new things. They want to gain mastery, they want to demonstrate knowledge. So the themes in this family are explore, master, demonstrate new learning, and comprehend and express. So those are the first four. The fifth family is the visionary family. And the visionary family is motivated to make an impact according to what's possible or ideal. So it's about what's out there. They're always thinking in the future, right? So there are three themes in the visionary family: experience the ideal, make an impact, and achieve potential. And then the final family is what we call the team player family. And so the team player family, as you can imagine, are people who like to be connected to others. They like to be a part of a collaborative effort. So the themes within this family are influence behavior, serve, collaborate, and make the grade. So those are the six families and a little bit about them. But again, the real magic of all of this is at the theme level. And when you begin to understand the unique themes that drive you and how they compel you and where you get, primarily your motivation is about where you get your motivational energy. So the themes describe where it is you tend to get your energy on a day-to-day basis.
Well, the way that you describe them, all of them seems to have positive attributes, but I know that they also have negative attributes, and how, and I guess you try to help us on overcoming those negative attributes. Because, for example, in my case, one of the things that kills me, although I love podcasting, I always find myself procrastinating. Oh, I had to write the show notes for this podcast. Oh, I had to do this editing. I mean, the one thing that I love is just having this conversation with you, and everything else is just I procrastinate, but I know it's part of the process. It's part of the creative process. So
Right.
I don't know how to use that information, but I do know that either the visionary, the achiever, the team player, all of them, as many positive attributes as they have, they also have negative attributes that hold them back.
Right, absolutely. Well, let me give you an example. It's very likely, by the way, that whatever your motivational themes are, whatever it is that's driving your most gratifying work, probably don't involve things in the optimizer family, right? Or things that are about tweaking and perfecting systems and making systems run efficiently and effectively. Instead, you're about learning new things. You're about expressing new things, about creating impact, about influencing others, right? Those are probably, and again, I would be hesitant to really make a guess at that without seeing the actual results of your MCode report. But I'll give you an example from my life of how those positive and negative, or what we call shadow side attributes, play out. So one of my top themes is and meet the challenge driven people need to feel like there's some imminent and critical challenge in front of them, right? That there's something that they need to tackle in order to move forward. And the problem with a lot of the work that I do, Alan, and probably similar to you, is my work is long arc work, meaning that if I'm writing a book, this book took me 4 years to write and release, so over the course of 4 years, there's a lot of work to do, but none of that work feels especially challenging to me because it's a long arc project. Writing 60,000 words in the next year, that doesn't feel like a challenge to me. It has to be imminent. It has to be in front of me. It has to be a mountain I can climb right now because it's there. It's in front of me. So one thing I've learned is that it's really easy for me to procrastinate when something doesn't feel challenging and to get distracted by things that do feel challenging. Something as silly as an administrative project I have to do to sort of crank it out and get it done, I can turn that into a challenge, like a quick challenge that's distracting me from the more important work, or something as silly as like a stupid video game that I'm trying to conquer because even though it's a complete waste of time and a complete distraction, it feels challenging to me in the moment. So what I've learned is that I have to create a series of mini challenges in my life. For example, I am going to write 500 words before 9:30 a.m. this morning, right, on my book. I will create those little mini challenges each day as a way to keep me engaged. I'll block my day, my time on my day. And I did it this morning before we had this conversation, where I block my day and I say, during this hour, I'm going to accomplish this. During this hour, I'm going to accomplish this. And then I'm going to give myself a break. And then I'm going to do this. And I'm going to give myself a break. And I establish a series of mini challenges throughout the day because it's important to me to feel that challenge. If I don't, I will procrastinate. I'll put it off. So that's just one way that the positive side of that, I'm driven to accomplish, to achieve, to overcome challenges, can also have a shadow side, which is I can be distracted by things that feel challenging, even if they're a complete waste of time, if I don't have those challenges structured into my work.
Okay, so now the next question is, first of all, how does a listener go around and take this test? And then I assume that once they discover what are the traits of their personality, you or let's call them, you tell them how to overcome their shadow self so that they can
Right.
continuously improve.
Yeah, so in the book itself, the motivation code includes a free version of the assessment. So you can take the assessment from the book, the motivation code, and it will tell you your top three themes. You
Nice.
basically are taking the same assessment as the full assessment. There's also a full assessment available at motivationcode.com, and that assessment reveals all 27 of the themes in rank order, your top families ranked as well, and also gives you a bunch of exercises, some additional videos, and other things to help you understand and apply motivation code in your life. But if you read the book, The Motivation Code, there is in the book a version of the assessment that is free and that is available, that will give you your top three themes. And you can use that as a companion to the book to identify some of those positive and shadow side attributes and next steps for you as well.
Wow, you just mentioned that in the morning you block some time to write. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing schedule? How, I mean, you are pumping out a book every 2 years, so how do you
Yeah.
put it together?
Yeah, so when I'm working on a book project, so when I'm not working on a book project, I don't make myself write. I just don't,
Right,
because everything has a season, right?
right.
I believe very firmly in the concept of rhythm, not the concept of balance. So some people think, oh, I write every day whether I'm working on a project or not. No, I want to give myself a break when I'm not working on a project. So right now, I mean, I'm still creating a lot of content. I create, 1 to 2 podcast episodes a week. I'm, creating other kinds of content for clients and whatnot. So I'm constantly creating content, but I don't force myself to write long arc book work when I'm not working on a book project. When I am working on a book project, my book writing is the first thing that happens every single day, and I write 500 words a day. And that's
Nice.
just the way it is. What I've discovered is if I write 500 words a day, that's 2,500 words a week, because I only write Monday through Friday. I give myself the weekend off. 2,500 words a week. That's a chapter every 2 weeks or so, the rough draft of a chapter every 2 weeks or so, which is a book in about 5 to 6 months. 60,000 words or so. Now, the reality is I have to write about 100,000 words to get to the final 60,000 words that end up in my manuscript. So I'm writing for about a year to get to a first draft. But 500 words a day, 5 days a week, basically for the entire year that I'm under contract for the book. And then typically what happens at that point is I turn in my first draft. My editor chops it up and tells me all the things I did wrong, which is amazing. It's great to have somebody do that. And then I go back and spend uh, hours a day going through that draft, refining, adding new content, new material. So at that point, my schedule looks a little different because it's not just sitting down to write or to crank things out. Instead, it's really about editing and refining and adding new material. So at that point, I just dedicate my morning to the project, and then I turn in the draft again, and then they send me back more things, and then I turn in the draft. So this goes on for 4 or 5 months after I turn in the first draft, and then typically at that point we lock the manuscript, and the book comes out about 6 months later. So it's from beginning to end. It's typically about a 2-year process. From the time I
Right.
sign a book contract to the time the book comes out is about a 2-year process, all told.
Okay, and the other part of your career is that you speak, but of course you are not traveling around anymore.
Right.
However, I saw in your website that you are doing workshops. So can you tell us what are you doing or how does it work?
Yeah, so I am doing both speaking events and workshops for organizations. So I'm doing speaking at a number of conferences virtually this fall, as well as doing some workshops for organizations this fall, which is a very different experience. Because again, one of my top motivations is something called influence behavior, which means I want to see people responding to what I'm saying. I want to see them nodding their head. I want to see that I'm having an impact on their behavior in some way. And it's hard to do when you're speaking virtually, right? So
Right.
it's been a very different kind of work for me. And I've had to learn how to get my motivational energy in different ways because I'm not getting that from the speaking and the workshops in person like I used to. But I'm doing that. But also I'm doing a series of workshops called Creative Leader Roundtable, which is pretty fun. And we've had a number of people sign up for that. And it's sort of more of like a public workshop where we're talking about the nature of leading creative teams and how to be more effective during this uncertain time that we're all in. So, really just trying like everybody else, trying to figure out how do we bridge between now and the other side of this thing. What's it going to look like? Because before this, I was traveling to different cities and doing workshops and open public workshops. People were flying in from all over the country to come to these workshops, and obviously that's not happening anytime soon. So so we're just trying to figure out what this looks like.
One question about how you put it all together. I mean, do you sit down on top in front of your desk and just talk to the camera, or do you have some kind of setup where it feels almost like as if you were giving a speech in a stage?
Yeah, so I do actually, it's pretty stationary. I'm just kind of looking into the camera, but I do have graphics and other things that are sort of like picture-in-picture graphics. So it's not like full screen, keynote presentation or PowerPoint presentation with a talking head. I mean, I'm really trying to make it as engaging as possible. And the one thing I've also learned is that asking questions and soliciting engagement is really important when you're speaking virtually. Just speaking at people for an hour is not helpful. You really have to engage people and really get them involved because people have, if you don't engage them, they're going to go check their email. It'll look like they're still paying attention, but they're really checking their email. They're doing other things. They're watching a ball game, whatever while you're speaking. So especially if they're compelled to be there by their manager. So, we figured out that you have to really engage people in a meaningful way if you want them to participate.
Okay, Todd. Well, I'm trying to stick to our time limit. So, can you tell us one more time your website and the name of the book and where can people find it?
Yeah, if you want to know more about Motivation Code, you can go to motivationcode.com. That's the website where you can find the book and the assessment and everything else. My website is toddhenry.com, and there you can find all my work as well as my podcast and anything else you want to know about me.